It is midnight in Washington, 5 a.m. in London, and 2 on a Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kim Hyun-ji. Let's get a check of the main stories we're following at this hour. With 8 farms in Korea's southwest confirmed to have been hit by bird flu, authorities are tightening quarantine measures and culling all ducks within a 3-kilometer radius of the infected farms. Attending this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, President Park Geun-hye urges global business leaders to invest more in Korea and take part in reshaping the country into a creative economy. A confidential report by the Japanese Navy released by a Korean media outlet shows the Japanese Army and university medical schools conducted gruesome medical experiments on living people during wartime. The Korean government says it now suspects that the recent bird flu outbreak may have been carried by a bird called the bean goose, in addition to the migratory Baikal teal ducks originally blamed for bringing the virus to Korea. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said in a press briefing Wednesday morning that H5N8, the same AI strain found in the migratory ducks, was detected in the carcasses of bean geese found near a reservoir in Gochang County in Jeollabuk-do province, where the outbreak was first detected. The ministry added that the number of farms in Korea infected with avian influenza has now increased to 8. And that 6 other farms are being inspected for signs of the virus. Staying on the bird flu scare in Korea, quarantine authorities are working round the clock to contain the avian influenza in the country's southern province of Jeollabuk-do, where 8 farms now believed to have been hit and nearly 300,000 ducks and chickens have been slaughtered so far. Our Connie Lee brings us his story from the field.
The quarantine measures have been taken up a notch. 3 days have passed since the first confirmed case of the highly pathogenic H5N8 bird flu strain was found here in southern Korea.
The infected farms are blocked off like this. This means no one can come in and no one can get out.
And it doesn't appear as though the quarantine measures will be eased anytime soon.
이상 절대 들어오시면 안 되고 이 안으로는 들어오시면 안 됩니다. 이게 공기종으로 떠다니는 바이러스고 세통이 떨어지기 때문에 속을 그랬어도 바로 또 전염이 될 수가 있으니까 얘가 저주기가 바로 돼 있잖아요. 새들이 자주 날아다니니까 한번 공기종이 떨어뜨리면 바로 전염이 되니까 상시 이렇게 자주 해줘야 될 상황이 들어요.
Here in Jeollabuk-do province, about 300 kilometers south of Seoul, every vehicle entering and exiting the area is sterilized. But with a new suspected case emerging on Tuesday, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs has now ordered that ducks within a 3-kilometer radius of an infected farm be slaughtered as a preventive measure. This has been expanded from the previous 500-meter radius. But the farmers aren't the only ones affected by the latest case of avian influenza.
None of the customers are asking for the duck and chicken dishes, even though I explained to them that cooked meat is fine.
This restaurant has seen its number of customers cut in half since the AI outbreak.
This time is worse than the last bird flu scare we had. My restaurant was affected last time, but this time, because the virus was found in my neighborhood, less people are coming to eat here.
Korea has had 4 bird flu outbreaks since 2003. The last time was in 2011, when over 6 million birds were killed. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
While Korea is worrying about its own bird flu outbreak, other countries in Asia are having their own problems. Different bird flu strains than the one identified in Korea have killed several people in China and Vietnam. Our Kwon So-ah has the details.
With more and more people coming down with bird flu in China, authorities there say the virus could infect and kill more ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday. The World Health Organization said this week that the number of confirmed bird flu infections in China is fast approaching 50, with the number of infected people doubling in the space of a week. Health agencies say the number of infections could explode toward the end of the month when millions of Chinese people set off to their hometowns to celebrate the Chinese New Year. Officials say 2 people in Shanghai, a patient in his 70s and a medical worker in his 30s, died of the highly pathogenic H7N9 strain of bird flu last Saturday. 2 people in Hong Kong succumbed to the same strain earlier this month. A 52-year-old Vietnamese man died from the H5N1 strain over the weekend, the first bird flu death in the country in 9 months. A Canadian national said to have been infected during a trip to China also died of the same strain earlier this month. The WHO expects this trend to continue for the next few months since the cold weather helps to circulate the virus. 385 people have died out of around 650 confirmed H5N1 infections since an outbreak in 2003. At least 45 have died from H7N9 since 2013. While it's widely known the virus can be transferred from birds to humans, some scientists fear the virus could mutate and make human-to-human infection possible. There has not been a single case of human infection so far of the H5N8 strain of bird flu that has appeared in ducks in Korea. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The government is announcing a set of measures as we speak to deal with what is the worst data leak in Korea's history, with millions of people affected. Earlier reports suggest that the measures are likely to include stronger monitoring of staff at financial companies involved in customer data management, tougher regulations to prevent financial firms from sharing client data with their affiliates, and stronger punitive measures on financial institutions. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok said at a meeting with economy-related policymakers earlier today that the government will hold accountable anyone involved in the massive data leak. He also promised the clients of the 3 card firms in question, KB국민, NH-농협, and Lotte, full compensation for any damages or losses they may incur. We will bring you the details of the government's announcement later in our newscast. President Park Geun-hye is in Davos for this year's World Economic Forum. Ahead of the forum's official opening, President Park spent the day meeting with business leaders from around the world to urge them to invest more in Korea. Our presidential correspondent Oh Jin-ju, who is traveling with the president, sends us this report.
Promoting Korea to the world's business leaders was the name of the game for President Park on the eve of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Taking part in Korea Night, an event dedicated to showcasing Korean culture and technology, which has been held in Davos for 6 straight years now, President Park called on the world's most powerful executives to look for investment opportunities in Korea's so-called creative economy. She promised to ease regulations on investment, except for ones that are truly necessary, to foster a better environment for foreign businesses.
이처럼 기업 활동을 하는데 최적의 환경을 만들고 세계 기업들이 한국에 마음껏 투자할 수 있도록 문화를 개방하고 있습니다. 여러분들도 한국에서 도약의 기회를 잡을 수 있기를 바랍니다.
Among the global figures attending the event were Lloyd's chairman John Nelson and Jacob Frankel, chairman of JP Morgan Chase International. President Park also met with Cisco CEO John Chambers.
I've wanted to meet you for a year now. Thank you for giving us the time.
And discussed ways to cooperate in the sector of Internet of Everything.
특히 요즘 한국에서도 사물 인터넷에 대해서 주목들을 하고 얘기를 많이 하고 있습니다.
Internet of Everything is a rising industry that aims at connecting objects in homes, offices, cars, and elsewhere to the Internet so they automatically adjust to people's needs and preferences. President Park asked Cisco to actively invest in Korea and closely work with Korean firms to help the nation realize her vision of a creative economy. Chambers said Cisco's joint project with the British government to develop the European country's high-tech industry is very similar to President Park's vision. He then said he would be very happy to expand cooperation with Korean institutions and companies in the sector. President Park will be making an opening speech on the creative economy and entrepreneurship in the first session of this year's World Economic Forum on Wednesday. She will also pitch Korea's qualities to the CEOs of global companies like Qualcomm, Aramco, and Siemens. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News, Bern.
The International Monetary Fund has raised its growth forecast for the world economy this year to 3.7%. Our Hwang Ji-hye also tells us what the IMF expects from the U.S. Federal Reserve's stimulus tapering.
In its updated World Economic Outlook on Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund revised its outlook for this year to 3.7%, up 0.1 percentage points from its earlier forecast. The fund expects the world economy to expand 3.9% in 2015. The IMF said the upward revision comes largely on the economic recovery in advanced nations, which is also leading a rebound in exports in emerging economies. That is reflected in the IMF forecast, which revised up its growth outlook for the U.S. in 2014 to 2.8% and the Eurozone economies to 1%. The Korean economy is also expected to pick up this year on strong external demands.
The global economic recovery will lead to expanded exports of Korean products. That will eventually lead to a recovery in the domestic economy.
The IMF, however, cited weak domestic demand in emerging nations as remaining concerns. It went on to say that domestic weakness combined with capital outflows prompted by the U.S. Federal Reserve's bond-buying stimulus tapering could result in sharper capital outflows and exchange rate adjustments. The Korean government has pledged to focus this year's economic policies on boosting domestic demand to create more jobs and achieve a balanced economy. The IMF's forecast on the Korean economy is expected to be released around February or April. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Let's take a look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour. Seoul shares remained nearly flat in late morning trading on Wednesday as investors opted to take a wait-and-see stance out of a monetary policy announcement by the Bank of Japan. By 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi had edged down to 1963 and the tech-heavy Kosdaq had gone up by 0.2% to 522. At the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was changing hands at 1,068 won against the greenback. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says North Korea is signaling that it's ready to resume the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks without any preconditions, but other member nations are asking for the North to first demonstrate its sincerity. At a press conference in Moscow on Tuesday, Lavrov said Russia is working closely with China for an agreement and added related countries should also make reaching a deal their top priority. The comments come amid a major peace offensive by the North following the execution of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's once powerful uncle, Chang Song-taek, last month. The multilateral dialogue involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been at a standstill since late 2008. The Korean trade official who was kidnapped in the Libyan capital of Tripoli over the weekend is safe, according to an official from Korea's foreign ministry. Han Seo-gu, the head of the local branch of the state-run Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, was abducted on Sunday evening local time. Citing a source, Korea's Yonhap News Agency reports the abductors are members of a small militia group, and the Libyan government and the militia are secretly negotiating a ransom payment. Other Korean media outlets say the gunmen asked for around $2 million, something Korea's foreign ministry denies, saying that the government would never disclose that kind of information for the sake of the abductees' safety. A Korean media outlet has released a confidential report proving that university medical schools and the Japanese Navy conducted brutal experiments on living people during wartime. The top secret reports were stored at Japan's parliamentary library. Our Son Jang-in has a story.
This is a confidential report by the Japanese Navy exposing medical experiments conducted during World War II on living people. The report details an experiment on the absorption action of iperite, known as mustard gas, which rots human skin.
This is a dissertation based on a medical experiment on living bodies to develop protective army clothing.
It is part of a trove of documents stored at Japan's National Diet Library and released by a Korean media outlet, proving that Japanese army and university medical schools conducted gruesome medical experiments on war prisoners and civilians while they were still alive. It is the first evidence of such experiments having been conducted by institutions other than the infamous Japanese military Unit 731 in China. The documents also reveal that medical departments at 9 imperial universities in Japan during that time carried out similarly brutal medical experiments.
Even after 1930, the cruel experiments continued at other Japanese universities. Unfortunately, Unit 731 wasn't the only one to conduct experiments on living people.
One of the most notorious cases of human experimentation involved 8 members of a U.S. Air Force B-29 crew. The experiment was conducted in 1945 from May to June at Kyushu University in Japan. The American prisoners were subjected to vivisection and other gruesome experiments before being killed. Professors and students from the university were later brought to trial on charges of wrongful removal of body parts and cannibalism. None were convicted of war crimes. The Japanese government has yet to comment on the revelation and has thus far only ever acknowledged the existence of Unit 731, not the experiments it was reported to have conducted. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
In a move that is almost certain to throw fuel on China's territorial disputes with its neighbors, Beijing plans to base a huge civilian patrol ship on one of the main islands it controls in the disputed South China Sea and begin regular patrols. The China Ocean News, published by the State Oceanic Administration, says the ship would be based on Woody Island, which China calls Sansha City, on the Paracel Islands. The report says the regular patrol will serve to protect China's maritime interests, but didn't say when they will begin. China claims virtually the entire South China Sea, putting it at odds with several countries in Southeast Asia, including the Philippines and Vietnam. Syria is being accused of systematic killings and torture on a truly ghastly scale. A report detailing the Assad regime's atrocities was released Tuesday as delegations began arriving in Switzerland for international talks aimed at ending the bitter conflict. Our Park Ji-won reports.
The new report reveals the Syrian government's systematic use of execution and torture. A team of former international war crimes prosecutors released their findings and ample photo evidence to back their claim that the Assad regime tortured and killed about 11,000 detainees.
We came to the conclusion that the killings were of an industrial kind, such that the evidence we found would certainly underpin any count of a crime at international law.
The photos were taken by a former Syrian military police officer who has since defected and fled the country.
The pictures were reminiscent of the worst pictures that came out of Belsen and Auschwitz after the Second World War. And these poor creatures were not just starved, but they were also tortured whilst they were starving.
Reacting to the report, the U.S. State Department condemned Syria in the strongest possible terms, saying the photos show apparent actions that would be serious international crimes. Britain's Foreign Secretary also expressed shock and horror at seeing the report.
I've seen a lot of this evidence. It is compelling and horrific. And it is important that those who have perpetrated these crimes are one day held to account.
Meanwhile, the world's leading human rights advocacy group has slammed the international community for not doing enough to end the atrocities being committed in Syria. In its annual report released on Tuesday, Human Rights Watch said world powers have focused too much on bringing President Bashar al-Assad and his government to the negotiating table and put aside humanitarian matters such as the protection of civilians.
What I hope the people gathered in Geneva will do is not simply to try to work out a long-term peace deal, but in the interim to put pressure on the Syrian government to stop targeting civilians, to stop deliberately depriving civilians of humanitarian aid.
The group also criticized Syria's close allies, Russia and China, for turning a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis in the country. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And now for our daily arts and culture segment with Lee Tae-ho. Today, Tae-ho brings in all of the latest news from the world of K-pop. Good afternoon, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon, Yeonji.
So I hear that you have news about the anticipated return of a global sensation.
That's right. Now I have an update on the status of a global K-pop star as well as his fellow cohorts who are also making news on the global stage.
First up today is an update on the return of the K-pop gentleman, Psy, who reportedly teamed up with different musicians from all over the world for his highly anticipated follow-up album. Psy's Korean record label YG Entertainment has confirmed that Psy has wrapped the shooting of his next music video featuring rapper Snoop Dogg and his fellow label mate, G-Dragon. Photos from the shoot were featured on YG Entertainment's official blog, YG Life blog, as well as both Psy and G-Dragon's Twitter feeds. YG Entertainment also added that Snoop Dogg has taken part in Psy's latest official studio album. The album is also suspected of featuring a collaboration with Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler. Psy's next album is expected to drop sometime in February. Also making news on the global stage is SM Entertainment's K-pop boy band EXO. The music website Billboard.com has featured the 12-member group as one of its 14 artists to watch in 2014. And for good reason as well. EXO has quietly become a mainstay on the US K-pop scene. The music video for their highly successful track Growl was the third most watched K-pop music video in the United States in 2013, trailing only videos from Psy and Girls' Generation. EXO also had 2 songs placed in the top 10 best-selling K-pop tracks in America for their songs Growl and Wolf. Both tracks are from their debut album XOXO, which was the first album in 12 years to sell over 1 million albums here in Korea. The kings of K-pop, TVXQ, are also receiving international attention for their latest album Tense, which was released on January 6th. It has made it to number 2 on Billboard.com's World Albums chart. This is no big surprise considering that the album has been doing well on international and domestic music distribution sites and charts.
So Psy is coming back, it seems like, and I think a lot of fans are waiting for his return.
That's right. Now, and I think to some degree that the rumors of Psy working with different musicians from all over the world has been kind of confirmed with YG, his label, coming out and saying that, you know, that Snoop Dogg was featured in the music video as well as his fellow label mate, G-Dragon. But I think fans are still curious about what is happening with all the rumors about Psy working with Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler as well as Justin Bieber? So we'll have to kind of stay tuned for that.
That's right. Well, speaking of Psy, I'm sure that when his new songs come out, it will shake up the charts. But what about this week?
Well, you know, I agree to some extent because K-pop fans here in Korea are kind of finicky about their K-pop music lately. But what I do know is that we have the K-pop hits for this week on our weekly K-pop Top 10 starting right now.
All right, let's go ahead and get this week's edition of the weekly K-pop Top 10 started at number 10 with the lovely ladies of AOA and their latest hot track, Miniskirt. And up a whopping 69 spots from last week to land at number 9 this week is a global hit, Let It Go by Idina Menzel from the soundtrack of Disney's latest animated musical sensation, Frozen. Down 8 spots from last week at number 8 is K-Will with Like a Star. Number 7 this week is Girls' Day with their track Something, sliding down 3 spots from last week. And at number 6 we find Gary of the group Lee-sang with the track XX Molla. This week's number 5 is the hit single My Love from the Stars by Yuna, which is off of the soundtrack of the popular drama You Who Came from the Stars. Number 4 this week is last week's number 1, Singing Got Better by Ailey, slipping 3 spots from last week. Number 3 is the hot new track Lonely by B1A4. The runner-up this week is the girl group A-Pink with their latest, Good Morning Baby. And claiming the top spot this week is another track from Gary titled Shower Later, featuring the vocals of musician Crush.
So it seems like Gary is doing very well with his music charts, but it seems like his music videos are causing quite a stir.
A little bit of controversy there. You know, the music video has been slapped with the big red 19 sticker, which means it's only for mature audiences.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Well, thank you, Taeho, for your report today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
All right.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more of the day's latest at 4 p.m. Korea time. See you then.